Hi, Aditi. Thank you so much for joining us on the Finding Order and Disorder podcast. And I'm just going to let you introduce yourself because I don't want to take that away from you. So,
Okay. Hi, Isha. Thanks so much for having me. Before introducing myself, I'm going to say I am so happy about the Finding Order and Disorder Foundation, and thanks for having me. Um, about myself, where do I start? So, as a person, I can call myself like a person who has sunflower energy, but professionally, I'm the founder of Much Much Media and Much Much Spectrum. Um, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a media entrepreneur, I'm Gen Z. So, yeah, some facts. Yeah, and I'm a neurodivergent woman. I identify as autistic and ADHD. That happened a few years ago. And yeah, I'm a late discovered neurodivergent person. Yeah, that's about me.
thank you, Aditi. So, what does neurodivergence mean to you? When we say neurodivergence, I think there's a lot of, not many people still know what that entails, especially in India. So, if you can.
Yeah. So neurodivergence, before going into neurodivergence, I'll talk about neurodiversity. So
Yes.
neurodiversity, like just like any diversity, like biodiversity or, any kind of diversity, just exactly like that. It's different kinds of brain. So we are all neurodiverse. So the world is neurodiverse. We are all different. Our brains are different. So that's neurodiversity. And when we talk about neurodivergence, so, there's this concept that some people are neurotypical and some people are neurodivergent. Neurodivergence means people whose brains are different, whose brains are sort of wired differently. And in the neurodivergent spectrum, there's autism, there's ADHD, learning disabilities, schizophrenia, bipolar. So there are multiple kinds of invisible disabilities. There's also depression and mental health that falls under neurodivergence. I'm someone, and I think for most people, when we say that someone is neurodivergent, they can also have multiple identities. Like I identify as autistic and ADHD. Somebody might have bipolar and autism and ADHD. So it's a spectrum. It looks different for everybody. So in India, I've heard one thing a lot, which is like, you don't look autistic. So I think the idea of autism is very different for people. And most people think that when they say that someone is autistic, someone might be, someone might have high support needs. So I have certain needs, but I'm not high support needs. My needs are comparatively low in nature. So yeah, I think it looks different for different people, and that's really what it means to me. In terms of my own neurodivergence, I think because I discovered it so late in life, I think it just means me. It just means, like, identity. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
Thank you for sharing, Aditi. I really liked your explanation, how you related it to yourself, as well as just giving a general definition of it. I wanted to know more of your personal journey with neurodivergence or diversity, how you came to identify with that, just your personal journey with it. So,
So, personal journey, it dates way back. It's, even though I'm late discovered, I had a family member who was neurodivergent. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't have the terminology. Like, I didn't know what autism was or what ADHD was or any other condition, but I think I knew people around me who were neurodivergent. And as they say that, neurodivergence runs in families, that's so true. So when I was small, there was I had an uncle who was neurodivergent, not diagnosed or anything. He had multiple other disabilities, which, those disabilities were very obvious. So people knew that, he is someone who has hearing impairment, who has lost his vision recently. So that was his identity. But again, there were a lot of other things, like his need to be alone, his communication challenges, those are the things that people never saw. And whenever people didn't understand him, or there was like a big gap in understanding who he was as a person, I think in those moments he had meltdowns, he had behavior issues, what people call now. So everybody labeled him as rude and problem creator, but nobody saw the challenges that he was facing, and nobody saw him for who he was. So that was what neurodivergence for me was back then. And I mean, everybody, even I thought that it's a problem if someone is being a certain way and they're not sort of thinking about other people. That's what society tells you, that you have to fit in to social molds. But after, I mean, when I was 22 or 23, I think I found out what autism really is. So I started reading some books. My husband actually started reading first, and his name is Alap. So he started reading this book called Neurotribes. Both of us were very tuned into the mental health scene in India. We also documented a lot of stories of people with different mental health conditions, people with mental illnesses, and young people in general. And we were equipped with the words like anxiety and depression and trauma, but the whole world of neurodiversity was still, I think, waiting for us. And when he started reading this book, Neurotribes, that's when I think we first came across these words and those experiences also. So he was reading, an anecdote, or an incident that was shared by a mother. So she, I think, shared something along the lines of, that her son was into reading car number plates, and he remembered all of those number plates. And that is an experience my husband really related a lot with. And there were many other experiences that he related with. So that's when, he started identifying a lot with those experiences. And he was like, I need to find out what it really is. So that's when he decided to go in for a diagnosis. And, that's how almost our entire family, my father-in-law, I myself, went in for a diagnosis. And that year was, full of discoveries, autism discoveries. That's when we realized that there's not much conversation about these subjects in India. And mostly it's looked at as, something which is a problem, which is, an issue, and not an identity. So that's when we decided to sort of talk more about these things, talk about our experiences, and start Much Fun Spectrum. So yeah, that's how.
That's what I wanted to ask you about that. So how was it born, and like when did you meet Alap, I guess, in your personal journey of life, and then when you met, and then how this organization started. So it's, yeah, just if you can.
Yeah. That's actually a long story, but
Because that's important too. Actually, the reason I'm asking this is because many a times we think if we get, especially because of the stigma, societal stigma, we think if we get diagnosed with something like this, we self-stigmatize, and sometimes we think, no, we're not good enough. We feel guilty, and we won't find someone or be accepted or be able to accept someone else who's going through something similar.
So we joke around that if we were diagnosed before, then we wouldn't have probably gotten married. But it's just a joke. Again, yeah, that's a common joke in our family. So 6 months into our marriage, we got diagnosed. So yeah, that I think our marriage really brought in a lot of discoveries, because that's we are so similar in a lot of ways, and we are so different in a lot of other ways. But after our marriage, I think a lot of the smallest things that we do, like needing some alone time, and liking smaller groups of even when we hang out, like we like to hang out in like smaller groups. So these were things that we were both okay with, and it was not something new because we both liked that. So I think that really affirmed a lot of our ways of being, and yeah, that's how the discovery happened.
That's incredible. I really like how you are describing this because it's interesting how back then you didn't identify as neurodivergent, but then when you came together and they say sometimes like like attract like, sometimes then you come together and you kind of discovered this together, and now you're on this journey and you're pursuing advocacy and mental health advocacy in India and abroad, because you have viewers all over the world and it's really a global initiative. So I wanted to ask you a little about how, and this was not really planned, but but out of curiosity, where does like neurodivergent and really be experiencing that and travel intersect? Because I know for me travel can be quite challenging, because I have been wanting to come to India as well, but that's one challenge that I face as someone who's neurodivergent. So how do you navigate like 17 cities and so many states and managing like equipment, crew? I always see your posts and you're like carrying all this stuff and going all about the country and the world. So how do you do this? So if you could share that.
I mean, both of us love traveling. So travel is not at all a challenge for us. We hate flights because those can be, overwhelming. But we were traveling by road. So that was a
Oh,
good thing.
road travel is the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For some parts, yeah, we did take some flights, but I think most of the thing was, like a road trip. So,
Yeah.
so even now, I mean, most of our work involves a lot of travel, and that's something we love because our crew sizes are typically large, but when we're doing something that is very, travel oriented, we have people whose work we admire. So it's always nice to be around people who are sort of like minded, whose work you admire, who are in sync with your way of storytelling. So I think that is something that, that's a special interest plus our work and career, and also something we love. So I think it's a mix of all of that, and which is why I think travel was not an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess when there's no pressure to kind of socialize and talk about personal things with strangers, but then when you're actually doing advocacy, it's similar with me. When I'm in social situations, or if I'm at like my college or a university, I'm interacting with academics, and then but cut to our social life, like we're homebodies. We don't step out. We don't step out much. Even my husband, Biswa,
Yeah.
just like we were home and we like it that way. So, but anyway, I guess my next question I want to find out about how you said it's so important because we have this team and we work together with people. So how do you find the power in really like collaborating and having these community collaborations, because you have like-minded people coming together for a certain cause and with a certain amount of passion, definitely, because you want to see something through. So how was that experience in really being that you are a mentor, you're a leader for these people, you come together and you want to see
Thanks
something
for saying
through.
that.
So how do you do that?
Ah, it's very wow. Okay, I'm speechless. I
No, I
Thanks
mean,
for
I didn't
saying
want to
that,
put you on the
but
spot with that, but that's essentially what you're doing, right? Because you have these people who are passionate about something, which you are
Mhm.
also passionate about, but then you come together, bring them together, and your results are just the kind of content you make is it's phenomenal. It's raw, authentic. And that's actually I started watching it and then I reached out. I remember after my book was out, but this is just Like, how do you, the power of collaboration, I guess that's what I want to tap in on, is
Yeah.
do that,
I
right?
mean, ever since we started Much Media, the idea was to bring in, diverse filmmakers. So not just people who are like-minded, but people who think different from us. So,
Absolutely.
that's also something that we really want. So, I mean, our way of filmmaking is about just the protagonist and seeing the world through their lens, but there are also other kind of filmmakers, other kind of creators who see the world different from us. So the idea was to sort of bring in people who probably are great at their work but might not fit into the norms of the industry. So we have a lot of DPs. We have our social media team. It comprises of people who are really good at their work, but might not be able to. So our team also consists of a lot of neurodivergent and disabled people, and when we see a lot of resumes, when we started hiring and still hiring, a lot of resumes are very different. Some typical ADHD resumes are like, someone has worked 3 months at one place and a year at some other place, and it's diverse. And a lot of hiring managers or HR people think that that's not ideal for their company. But we also like to do interviews with those people, and these are not your typical job interviews. We don't believe in typical job interviews. We try to have a conversation where we figure synergies. We find out how this person is, like how did they get into this particular thing first of all, and how do they want to contribute to our work. So a lot of people who we work with are also people who have been following our work since the very beginning. So, and they have been the ones who have been writing to us, you should do this, you should be making a film on this. So they already have that passion about our work and about everything that Much Spectrum does. And I think that's why I think the fit, the match is like really perfect, because I mean, in terms of collaborations, also they are the ones who are much more enthusiastic about working with new people. We are the ones sort of figuring a lot of other stuff, and our team is becomes the set of a group of people who are really passionate about like discovering new ways to collaborate with other organizations.
Thank you for sharing that. And hint, that's a lot of things that you can use if you want to work with much media. Or but I really like what you said about how we think that working in one particular place for extended periods of time is really a strength. Whereas I completely agree with what you said about how that's not always the case. It also depends on how a person works, because I know if anyone were to see my resume or CV, I have also worked in many different places as an early childhood educator. But
Yeah.
I think that's also a strength in a way, because you actually have experience in so many places, and whether or not you leave it due to, in my case anyways, for neurodivergence, or if you're studying, because in my case I was studying at that time, I don't think we should use that against someone, because I those two really don't have much to do with each other. And plus, if we're doing arts, that's something that's not really like considered a parameter.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were just talking to somebody the other week. I mean, that was, I think, the final round of their interview. And we asked them, like, why did you switch so many jobs and, so frequently? And the thing that they mentioned was, that a lot of places didn't understand their working style, and they are a designer, so they like to work late at night and create whatever illustrations they are making late at night. And I mean, that is something that even I like to do because it's quiet at night or early morning. It's quiet. It's there are very few people around. It's very good for creative people in general. So why not? And I think the things that people think are a deficit might not always be a deficit. That can also be someone's strength, because I mean, if I create like beautiful illustrations late at night, why not? Like, I should be creating
Yeah.
illustrations late at night then.
Actually, most of my writing has happened but like late at night, like when I'm
Yeah.
feeling those emotions, and it comes out easily, and it doesn't take much time because you're in that zone and it just comes out, right? So I guess we were talking about much media and everything. I wanted to get your take on Gen Z, of course, and also the power of media in storytelling, because you've really tapped into that and really empowering the voices which otherwise would not have had a chance to really share their story with the world. So
I think the power of media is phenomenal. You look at social media is also, a big way in which a lot of people make films. So filmmaking is not just documentaries or, feature length films. Filmmaking is also making reels or also making like posts. And that's just an observation. Ever since we started, we've seen, because I mean, a lot of people have also discovered after that, and Gen Z, most Gen Zers also identify as neurodivergent. There was an article that I was reading today, and it said that most Gen Zers identify as neurodivergent. I think, which is why, because as soon as this generation got into social media, a lot of people became creators. Neurodivergent people, disabled people started becoming creators, and that itself became like a big boom in this space. A lot of people started understanding these words and terminologies. And just to give you, like, before, because you asked this beautiful question, why media is, a strong tool for all these, the understanding of neurodiversity, mental health, or any social issue for that matter. I mean, back when we were small, I think we're
yeah.
of the same age almost.
Yeah.
So when we were small, how many actors or characters did you see on TV or in cinema who were different, who were sort of, who didn't fit into the molds of, what is considered normal? There were hardly any, right? There were no people who looked different, who were probably disabled. We never saw that. And it's not like those kind of people don't exist. We do exist. We are right here. And now, ever since I think 2021, 22, there are so many shows, there are so many films that have neurodivergent representation, that have disabled representation, that have queer representation.
Yeah.
And now finally we have started, addressing these identities in our entertainment also. So it's not like, everything is not about advocacy. I feel like not every character, every story has to be about someone being autistic. An autistic character can just exist. Like, the story can be about, like, it can be a rom-com or it can be a thriller, and an autistic character can just exist, just like any other character. So I feel, it's because you're part of this world. 15% of our world's population consists of disabled people. Then why not our media? So that's what I think. As when we talk to brands and our partners, we talk about how your audience also consists of disabled people. So it's not just able-bodied people or non-disabled people who are part of your audience. Like a toothpaste, even a disabled person buys a toothpaste. So we are you're consumers also, so you need to think of us.
Yeah, yeah.
An autistic person also, watches TV. We also watch Netflix. We also, consume everything that other people do. So we should be your target audience because now more and more people are also identifying as neurodivergent because awareness is increasing. You look at most media that's created outside of India. So India, I think, is still not there yet, I feel, but we definitely will be there very soon because we are sort of catching up to other countries. We are trying to, at least. But most other countries are creating, brilliant media. Like there's this ad that Vanish UK created, and I mention this ad in most places where I talk. I love that ad. It's about sensory sensitivities. It's about how, clothes that are itchy or might be irritable for autistic people can be made softer. So, there's a whole clothing angle, there's a whole sensory angle, which Vanish UK addressed, and they ran, I think, a year-long campaign. The campaign still exists, and they're still doing brilliant work in that space. Netflix is commissioning a lot of work, which includes diversity, not just disability. There's also queerness, there's racial diversity. So I feel we are really, our lens of looking at things is really changing, because when you look at media that was from the early 2000s, or even later, I think we looked at things very differently. We sort of tried to bring together things into one umbrella and said, okay, this is cool, you have to be like this. And now cool is anything. You can be anything or anyone and you can still be cool. So yeah, I think we are trying to make neurodiversity cool.
Yeah, I really thought of something when you mentioned feature films and the presence of neurodivergence or neurodiversity in it. I do remember a while back. Actually, I think this was like when I was about like 4 or 5. My mom made this documentary. It wasn't a documentary; it was a feature film, and it was called Motia Baba. It was about a blind man, but it was about the bond that he had with this young girl who believed in, had that faith that she could heal him because she saw something, in her school, and it talked about the healing power and the story of Jesus, where they take the mud and apply it on. So they had done this sequence, and even back then it was difficult to really like get someone to like show this and get any bias, but because back then it's even like doing topics like this, but especially in a feature film, was difficult, and because this was in India, right? So
Yeah.
it makes me think of that when you say, and I wonder if there must have been also other people even trying to do it back then, and actually they didn't get that chance to show their work,
I
on
completely
these
agree.
topics. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I've seen your mom's work. I'm a big fan.
yeah,
And I completely agree with you. I mean, there must have been so many people, because even in the mainstream cinema, in the Indian cinema, I feel that there are a lot of filmmakers whose work is different, and some of their films even didn't work well commercially,
yeah.
but those were brilliant films. Like there's so many films that I think needed much more recognition, and but I think the audience wasn't sort of ready to
They
accept
were,
those films.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also feel that those films are the ones that will also get consumed over centuries and generations, because
Yeah.
there's like how we have that like fast food and the junk food. Like I think those films might be popular for a certain amount of time, but then 10 years later nobody will even like go back to
Yeah.
seeing it again. But I
Yeah.
guess the shelf life of certain films and certain content is just so powerful that it's going to continue to exist and impact and empower generations to come. So Yeah, I guess it was, I just want to kind of end with a note of gratitude to actually for you and Alap together to actually give birth to much media, much spectrum, and actually empower these voices and including mine. I know you featured me in one episode. But thank you for
Thanks so
that.
much for your kind words, Isha.
Uh,
It's always nice to talk to you. And yeah, I mean, hope to do more stuff together.
so Aditi has joined our NGO and in the advisory committee, and I'm so grateful to have you. And I, yeah, definitely hope to do more things together. I know we're having our first in-person event coming up in the summer, but we are planning to have a lot of hybrid collaborations. So hope to do something soon for that. And thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me to discuss this very pertinent topic, which again does not have to be seen in the light of, always advocacy or always, about autism. We're real people. We need to talk about this and we need to normalize these things because it's not
I
always,
so agree.
yeah.
I so agree with you. I
Yeah.
so agree with you. To
So,
more different ways of raising our voices, to more films and to more media, to Finding Order in Disorder Foundation.
yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Aditi.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Isha.
Bye.